Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've been running long haul for 12 years now, and I thought I'd seen every type of truck stop, motel, and roadside dive that America had to offer. But nothing prepared me for what happened at the Desert Rose Motel just off I-40 in New Mexico, about 30 miles east of Albuquerque. It was late February, one of those bone-cold desert nights where the wind cuts through your jacket like a knife. I'd been pushing hard from Phoenix to Oklahoma City, hauling a load of electronics that needed to be there by morning. My 14-hour clock was ticking down, and I had maybe 40 minutes left before I'd be in violation. The nearest truck stop was another 60 miles out, but this little motel had a sign that read, "Truck parking available," in faded red letters. The Desert Rose looked like it had been forgotten by time. Single story, probably built in the 70s with that southwestern adobe style that had seen better decades. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting an uneven pink glow across the cracked asphalt parking lot. I swung my Peterbilt around back, where there was just enough room to park without blocking anyone in. The office was small and dimly lit, with wood paneling that had probably been stylish once upon a time. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like he'd been there since the place opened. Thin, weathered face, silver hair slicked back, wearing a polo shirt with the motel logo that had faded to the point where you could barely make it out. His name tag read, Earl. "Need a room for the night," I said, pulling out my wallet. Earl nodded slowly, like he was thinking it over. $48. Cash or card, doesn't matter to me. His voice had that gravelly quality you get from years of cigarettes and desert air. I handed him my card and filled out the registration. As he ran it through an old-fashioned credit card machine, the kind with the carbon paper that you slide back and forth, I noticed something odd. The guest registry book was open on the counter, and I could see the entries from the past few days. What struck me was that every single name was a trucker. Not families, not business travelers, just drivers like me. All stopping for one night, all driving alone. "Here you go," Earl said, handing me a physical key attached to a plastic diamond-shaped tag. "Room 18, around the side there." Room 18 was at the far end of the building, facing the highway. I could hear the occasional truck rolling by, their engine brakes echoing off the canyon walls in the distance. The room was exactly what you'd expect. Queen bed with a floral comforter that had seen better days. Small TV bolted to a dresser, bathroom with a shower that probably hadn't been updated since Reagan was president. I tossed my duffel bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed to pull off my boots. That's when I noticed the notepad on the nightstand. It was one of those generic motel pads, but someone had written on the top sheet in a pencil, "Don't let Earl know you can see him." I stared at the note for a long moment. The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written in a hurry or by someone whose hands were trembling. I flipped through the rest of the pad. Every sheet had something written on it. Different handwriting, different messages, but all with the same desperate tone. "He's not what he seems. Check the mirror at 3 a.m. Don't drink the coffee in the morning. The registry book, look at the dates." My hands were shaking as I flipped through page after page of warnings. Some were in pen, some in pencil. Some looked like they'd been scratched in with a fingernail, all from different people, all terrified of something. I looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. 11:47 p.m. I had a choice to make. I could pack up and leave, find somewhere else to spend the night, or I could stay and see what these warnings were about. The rationale part of my brain said to get out of there, but the part of me that had been driving these highways for over a decade, the part that had seen strange things in the small hours of the morning, that part was curious. I decided to stay awake and see what happened at 3 a.m. I sat in the chair facing the mirror above the dresser, the notepad in my lap, reading through the messages over and over. Some of them mentioned specific details about Earl. How his reflection didn't quite match his movements, how his voice sounded different when he thought no one was listening, how he seemed to know things about the truckers who stayed there that he shouldn't have known. At 2:30, I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate steps that stopped right in front of my room. I held my breath and listened. After a moment, I heard the soft sound of a key sliding into the lock. The door handle turned slowly, and the door cracked open just an inch. Through the gap, I could see Earl's face peering in, but something was wrong with it. His features seemed shifted somehow. His eyes were too large, his mouth too wide, like someone had taken a photograph and stretched it in all the wrong directions. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, just watching. I remained perfectly still in the chair, trying to control my breathing. Finally, he pulled the door closed, and I heard his footsteps moving on to the next room. At exactly 3 a.m., I looked in the mirror. Earl was standing behind me. Not in the room. I could see the room was empty when I turned around. But in the reflection, he was there, standing right behind my chair, that same distorted face staring directly at me through the glass. His mouth was moving like he was speaking, but I couldn't hear any words. I spun around. Nothing there. Looked back at the mirror. He was gone. I grabbed my bag and got out of there. I didn't bother checking out. Didn't worry about the $48. I just threw my stuff in the cab and fired up the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the motel office. Earl was standing in the window, watching me leave, but his reflection in the glass was doing something completely different. It was waving goodbye. I drove straight through to Oklahoma City, delivered my load, and tried to put the whole experience out of my mind. But a few weeks later, I was talking to another driver at a truck stop in Amarillo, and he mentioned staying at a place called the Desert Rose. Said the night clerk was weird, but the strangest thing was finding all these notes hidden around his room, warnings about not trusting the staff. I asked him what he did with the notes. He said he added his own warning and left them for the next guy. I looked up the Desert Rose Motel online when I got home. According to the reviews, it's been owned by the same family for 40 years. Earl's been the night clerk the entire time. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. According to the obituaries I found, Earl Morrison died in a car accident in 1987, 35 years ago. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. Every trucker knows Channel 19. It's our lifeline out there, the place where we share road conditions, warn each other about speed traps, and just talk to keep from going crazy during those long, lonely stretches. After 12 years on the road, I know most of the regular voices between Phoenix and Dallas. There's Moondog, who runs the same route I do and always has a joke ready. Sweet Tea, a lady driver from Georgia who checks in every night around 10. Iron Mike from Colorado, whose voice sounds like he's been smoking since he was 12. But 6 months ago, I started hearing a voice I didn't recognize. And that voice has been haunting me ever since. It started on a run from Tucson to Little Rock. I was crossing through New Mexico on I-40, somewhere between Gallup and Albuquerque, when I heard it for the first time. It was about 1 in the morning, and the highway was mostly empty except for a few other trucks scattered across the miles. "Eastbound Peterbilt, you've got a problem coming up." The voice was clear, clearer than most CB transmissions. Male, middle-aged, with a slight southwestern accent, but there was something off about it. It sounded hollow somehow, like it was coming from very far away. I keyed my mic. "This is Red Dog eastbound at mile marker 89. What kind of problem are we talking about?" "Blown tire debris in the right lane about 2 miles ahead. Looks like it came off a trailer." I slowed down, and sure enough, there it was. Chunks of rubber scattered across the right lane. I managed to avoid it and keyed up again. "Thanks for the heads up, driver. What's your handle?" Silence. I tried again. Breaker 19, looking for the driver who called out the debris. Nothing. I figured maybe it was someone who'd already moved out of range, or maybe they'd switched channels. It happens. But something about that voice stuck with me. The tone of it, the way he'd known exactly where I was and what I was driving. 2 nights later, I was running through Texas on I-20, heading toward Dallas with a load of machinery. It was raining hard and the road was getting slick. I was taking it easy, maybe 55 in a 65 zone, when the voice came back. "Red Dog, you're going to want to get over to the left lane." Same voice, same hollow quality. This time I was ready for it. "Copy that. What's the situation?" "Stalled vehicle about a mile ahead. Right shoulder. No lights." I moved over to the left lane, and about a mile later I saw it. A pickup truck sitting on the shoulder with no lights on, almost invisible in the rain. If I'd stayed in the right lane, I might have clipped it. "Thanks for the warning," I radioed back. "That was a good catch. What's your 20? No response. Over the next few weeks, the voice kept coming back, always at night, always when I was alone on long stretches of highway. Sometimes it was traffic warnings that turned out to be accurate. Sometimes it was weather alerts that helped me avoid getting caught in sudden storms. Once, it warned me about a speed trap that I never saw, but that other drivers confirmed later. The voice was helping me, but I couldn't figure out who it was, or how they always seemed to know exactly where I was and what I was driving. I started asking around at truck stops, describing the voice to other drivers, but nobody knew what I was talking about. Then, about 3 months ago, something changed. I was running through Oklahoma on I-40, somewhere between Oklahoma City and Fort Smith. It was a clear night, good weather, light traffic. I was making good time and feeling pretty good about life in general. That's when the voice came back, but this time it was different. "Red Dog, you need to pull over. Right now." The urgency in the voice made my blood run cold. In all the previous contacts, the voice had been calm, almost matter-of-fact. This time, there was something like panic in it. "What's the situation?" I radioed back. "Pull over now. Don't ask questions. Just pull over." I looked around. There was nothing obviously wrong. The truck was running fine, no warning lights on the dashboard. The road ahead looked clear, but something in that voice made me hit my turn signal and start moving toward the shoulder. I'd barely gotten stopped when I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. A car was coming up fast, way too fast for the conditions. As I watched, it started to weave, crossing the center line and then jerking back. The driver was either drunk or falling asleep at the wheel. The car shot past me doing at least 90, weaving back and forth across both lanes. About a quarter-mile ahead, it lost control completely, flipped twice, and came to rest upside down in the median. I called 911 and drove up to see if I could help, but there was nothing anyone could do. The driver, a young woman maybe 25 years old, had been killed instantly. If I hadn't pulled over when I did, if I'd still been in that spot when she came through, she would have hit me head-on. At those speeds, we both would have died. "Thanks," I whispered into the CB handset. "I don't know who you are, but thank you." For the first time, the voice responded immediately. "You're welcome, Red Dog. Drive safe." After that night, I became obsessed with figuring out who was watching over me. I started keeping a log of every contact, noting the time, location, and what the voice had warned me about. I researched CB radio technology, trying to understand how someone could track my location so precisely. The contacts kept coming, maybe once or twice a week, always helpful, always accurate. But I started noticing something else. The voice only contacted me when I was alone, and if there were other trucks nearby, if I was running in a convoy, or even just had another driver within a few miles, the voice stayed silent. 2 weeks ago, I finally got up the courage to ask the question that had been eating at me. Mystery voice, I need to ask you something. Who are you, and how do you always know where I am? There was a long pause, longer than usual. When the voice came back, it sounded different, sadder somehow. I used to drive that route. Red Dog, same company, same runs. I know those roads like the back of my hand. Used to drive. What happened? Did you retire? Another long pause. I had an accident about 3 years ago, just outside of Amarillo. Fell asleep at the wheel and hit a bridge abutment. Truck caught fire. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. Are you saying? I'm saying I look out for drivers who remind me of myself. Drivers who are alone too much, who push too hard, who don't know when to quit. I pulled over at the next rest area and sat in my cab for an hour, trying to process what I'd just heard. I looked up truck accidents near Amarillo from 3 years ago. I found the report easily enough. Driver named Robert Red Johnson, age 48, killed when his Peterbilt left the roadway and struck a concrete barrier. The truck had burned so completely that it took dental records to identify the body. Red Johnson, Red Dog. He'd been using my handle before I ever thought of it. The last contact came a week ago. I was running through New Mexico on I-40 and I'd been driving for 13 hours straight. I was exhausted, fighting to keep my eyes open, but I was only about 2 hours from my destination, and I wanted to push through. Red Dog, you need to stop. I'm fine, I radioed back. Just a couple more hours. No, you're not fine. You're exactly where I was 3 years ago. Pull over and get some sleep. I can make it. That's what I said. The voice was quiet for a moment, and when it came back, it was barely a whisper. Please don't make me watch it happen again. I pulled into the next truck stop and slept for 8 hours. I haven't heard from the voice since then. Channel 19 is back to the usual chatter. Moondog with his jokes, Sweet Tea with her check-ins, Iron Mike with his gravelly wisdom. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on a dark highway, I find myself listening for that hollow, distant voice. And I always pull over when I'm tired. There are truck stops, and then there are places that just exist to serve truckers who have nowhere else to go. The kind of places you find on old highways that the interstate bypassed, where the only customers are drivers who took a wrong turn or got desperate for fuel. I found one of those places on Highway 50 in Nevada, and I wish I never had. I was running a load from Reno to Denver, taking the scenic route because my delivery wasn't until the next afternoon and I wanted to avoid the mountain traffic on I-80. Highway 50 is what they call the loneliest road in America, and it lives up to the name. Miles and miles of high desert, sagebrush, and mountains that look like sleeping giants under the endless sky. My fuel gauge was getting low, and my truck GPS was showing the next fuel stop was still 60 miles away. That's when I saw the sign, Nowhere Junction, fuel, food, lodging, 2 miles. I'd never heard of the place, and it wasn't on my GPS, but fuel is fuel. The exit ramp was barely paved, more like a wide spot in the road than an actual off-ramp. It led to a cluster of buildings that looked like they'd been there since the 50s. A truck stop with 2 diesel islands, a small diner, and what might have been a motel at one time. The whole place had that sun-bleached, forgotten look that you see in ghost towns. There were 3 other trucks parked there when I pulled in. All of them looked like they'd seen better days. Faded paint, rust spots, the kind of rigs that independent drivers run until they fall apart. I pulled up to the first diesel island and killed the engine. The fuel island was old school. No pay at the pump, no credit card readers. Just a simple pump with a mechanical counter and a sign that said, "Pay inside." I grabbed my wallet and headed for the building. The inside of the truck stop was like stepping back in time. Linoleum floors, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered, and the kind of vending machines you don't see anymore. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like he'd been there since the place opened. Probably in his 70s, wearing overalls and a John Deere cap, with eyes that had seen too much and said too little. "Fill up?" he asked, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Yeah, diesel, Island one." He nodded and hit a button under the counter. I heard the pump outside click on. "That'll be about 60 gallons, give or take." I handed him my card, but he shook his head. "Cash only here, son. Machine's been broke for years." I had enough cash on me, so I pulled out my wallet. As I was counting out bills, I noticed something odd. There was a bulletin board behind the counter covered with what looked like missing person flyers. All of them were truckers, professional headshots, descriptions of their rigs, last known locations. Some of the flyers looked old, yellowed with age. "Lot of missing drivers," I said, nodding toward the board. The old man glanced back at it and shrugged. "Desert's a big place. Easy to get lost out here." I paid for the fuel and walked back to my truck. As I was filling up, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The other 3 trucks parked there. They all matched descriptions on the missing person flyers. Same colors, same configurations, even the same company logos on the doors. I looked around the lot more carefully. There were more trucks parked behind the building, maybe a dozen of them, all in various states of decay. Some had flat tires, others had their hoods up, and a few looked like they'd been there for years. Weeds were growing up through the wheel wells. The fuel pump clicked off, and I hung up the nozzle with shaking hands. I needed to get out of there, but as I reached for my door handle, I heard footsteps approaching. "Nice rig," said a voice behind me. I turned around to see one of the other drivers walking toward me. He was a big man, probably in his 50s, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. He looked normal enough, but there was something off about his eyes. They were too bright, too focused, like he was seeing something I wasn't. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You been here long?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I've been here a while. We all have. It's a good place to rest, you know, peaceful, quiet, the kind of place where a man can just stay." "I need to get back on the road," I said, reaching for my door handle again. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was like iron and his skin was cold as ice. "No rush," he said, that same unsettling smile on his face. "Why don't you come inside, have some coffee, meet the other drivers?" I looked toward the diner and saw faces in the windows. 4 or 5 men, all watching me with the same bright, focused eyes, all wearing clothes that looked like they were from different decades. One in a 70s-style shirt, another in 80s trucker gear, one who looked like he'd stepped out of the 50s. "I really need to go," I said, trying to pull my arm free. His grip tightened. "The thing about this place," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "is that once you stop here, you don't really want to leave. It gets into your blood, you know, the peace, the quiet, the feeling that you finally found where you belong." I looked into his eyes and saw something that made my blood freeze. They weren't just bright, they were empty, like looking into a doll's eyes or a shark's. There was intelligence there, but no humanity. With my free hand, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my truck keys. I found the panic button on my key fob and pressed it. My truck's horn started blaring, the sound echoing across the desert. The man's grip loosened just enough for me to break free. I yanked my arm away and dove into my cab, slamming the door and hitting the lock button. Through the windshield, I could see the other drivers coming out of the diner, all moving with that same unnatural calm. I started the engine and threw it into gear, not caring about proper warm-up procedures. The truck lurched forward, and I heard something hit the trailer as I pulled away from the fuel island. In my mirrors, I could see the drivers standing in a line, watching me leave with those same empty eyes. I drove for 2 hours straight before I felt safe enough to stop. When I finally pulled into a legitimate truck stop in Ely, I was shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee cup. I looked up Nowhere Junction online when I got home. According to the state records, there's no truck stop by that name on Highway 50. Never has been. But I found something else that made my blood run cold. A news article from 5 years ago about a series of truck driver disappearances along that stretch of highway. The article mentioned that all the missing drivers had been independent operators, driving alone with no set schedules or regular check-ins. Just like me. I still run Highway 50 sometimes. It's the most direct route for certain loads, but I always make sure I have enough fuel to make it all the way across without stopping. And sometimes, when I'm driving through that empty desert at night, I see lights in my rearview mirror that seem to follow me for miles before disappearing into the darkness. Some say it ended that night, but I still wake up screaming, feeling that cold grip on my wrist and seeing those empty, doll-like eyes. Thanks for listening, if you made it through the darkness.